He chose fireworks over her heartbeat. She chose revenge over forgiveness.
My name is Alexander Chin, and I'm a transplant surgeon. Or at least, that's what I thought I was. Today, I'm not so sure what I am anymore. A man who sacrificed everything for medicine, or someone so blinded by success that I couldn't see what was happening right in front of me. There's a phrase surgeons whisper silently when they walk into the operating room. Your hands save lives. But nobody ever mentions the price. Nobody talks about the things you lose while you're focused on saving someone else. And I found out the hard way. Catherine was my wife, or at least that's what I believed. 9 years of marriage, a house in Westmount with those beautiful gray stone walls and the maple tree in the front yard that turned crimson every October. A life that looked perfect when you looked at it from a distance, but when you get too close to something beautiful, you always see the cracks. And there were so many cracks. She had a congenital heart condition that got worse with age. The cardiologist said she needed delicate surgery. I could have done it. Specialized surgeons do it every day. But I refused. Not from ego, from fear. Fear that my hands, those same hands that save strangers every single day, might fail when it came to the person I loved most. So I referred her to my colleague, Dr. Michael Torres. He was good, really good. One of the best cardiac surgeons at McGill University Health Center. And that decision would change absolutely everything. The night before her surgery, Catherine lay in bed next to me. The December wind was howling outside, the way it does in Montreal when winter really sets in. She turned to me, her dark eyes catching the light from the street lamp outside, and asked, "Alexander, will you stay with me during surgery?" I lied. I said yes. I said I'd be there in the waiting room, that I'd be the first person she'd see when she woke up. But I didn't go. While she lay under surgical lights with Torres operating, opening her chest, holding her heart in his hands, I was in a VIP box at La Grande Rue de Montreal watching Christmas fireworks with Sophia. Sophia was a 28-year-old anesthesiologist. At least that's what she told me. She had long blonde hair that fell past her shoulders, a laugh that made my chest tighten, and a way of making me feel alive that Catherine hadn't done in years. I'm not here to apologize for that. I'm not here to justify it. I'm here to tell you what happened after. And what happened after was the worst kind of nightmare. The kind that feels real because it is real. The kind where you can't wake up no matter how hard you try. While Sophia kissed me under the fireworks, red and gold explosions lighting up the St. Lawrence River, my phone buzzed. A text from the hospital. Catherine woke from anesthesia. Surgery successful. I should have felt relief, but all I felt was panic. Ice-cold panic that started in my stomach and spread through my entire body. Because I knew Catherine could tell that I wasn't there. She knew. She always knew. Some marriages have secrets you can hide in closets and delete from phones. Ours had secrets that explode in your face like those fireworks above us. When I walked into the recovery room at McGill, the anesthetic smell hit me first. Then I saw her. Catherine was awake, but something was different. Her eyes tracked my movement as I entered the room, followed me as I walked to her bedside, but her body didn't move. Not really. Just the eyes. Just those dark, accusing eyes that were supposed to forgive me, but couldn't. Torres came looking for me in the hallways 20 minutes later. His face was pale, his surgical cap still on. He said the words I'll never forget. "Alexander, there's a complication. During anesthesia, Catherine had a cerebrovascular event, a stroke. She's conscious, but paralysis is affecting most of her body. She can't move or speak, but she can hear, she can think, she knows what's happening." My world collapsed in that moment.
That second between when Torres finished speaking and when the truth really hit my chest was when my entire life changed. My wife, the woman I just betrayed while she fought for her life in an operating room, was now trapped in her own body. And she knew. Somehow, she knew. Because when I walked back into that room and took her hand, she blinked twice. In the language paralyzed patients develop with nurses, 2 blinks mean no. No, I don't forgive you. No, you weren't there. No, you lied. Yes, darling. You have every right to be furious with me. Every right to hate me. Every right to wish I was the one in that bed instead of you. The days after that were a blur of guilt, panic, and pretense. I played the perfect worried husband. I visited every day, sometimes twice a day. I held her hand and talked about the weather, about the snow covering Mont Royal, about how the Canadians were doing this season. I whispered comforting words that meant nothing. But every time I saw her, those eyes didn't forgive me. They just saw me. They saw through every lie, every excuse, every justification I'd built up in my mind. And being seen by someone you've betrayed, knowing they can't turn their face away or leave the room or scream at you like you deserve, is a form of torture no prison could match. Because you can't escape. You're trapped there, with them, face to face with your own cowardice. The weight of it was crushing. I started losing weight. I couldn't sleep. I closed my eyes and see Catherine's face frozen in that bed, watching me. Then came the call. A detective. His name was Morrison, and he had that flat, emotionless voice that cops develop after years of hearing lies. He knew about Sophia. He knew I'd been in that VIP box while my wife was under a surgeon's blade. He knew about the kiss. He knew about everything. Dr. Chen, your wife informed the hospital that you were absent during her surgery. She communicated this through a series of blinks with one of the night nurses. We need to talk about where you were that night. It was impossible. Catherine couldn't even blink in Morse code to ask for water. How did she manage to tell someone an entire story? And then, in a frozen moment that made my blood run cold, I understood. She did. Somehow she found a way. Maybe she blinked to a nurse who knew how to interpret. Maybe she found someone patient enough to go through the alphabet letter by letter. But she did it. And the police were knocking on my door. This is where it gets strange. This is where you'll think I'm making it up, that I've lost my mind, that I'm unreliable. But I'm not. Because after the police left that day, after I'd given my statement and watched Morrison drive away in his unmarked sedan, the messages started. Messages from unknown numbers. The first one said, "Do you miss the anesthesia? I have more for you." Then photos started arriving. Photos of Sophia and me kissing. Photos taken from that box at La Grande Rue. Photos nobody should have because we were alone. Or at least I thought we were alone. Security cameras at the hospital showed things that didn't make sense. Me in places I'd never been. The cafeteria at 2 a.m. The basement storage room. Having conversations with people I didn't recognize. Forged signatures on documents I didn't sign. Medical records I'd never accessed suddenly showed my login credentials. My world was crumbling and nobody felt real anymore. The paranoia started creeping in like Montreal's winter cold, seeping through every crack.
The truth, if such a thing exists, was more disturbing than any lie I could have lived. Because when my lawyer, Daniel Park, went to the room where Catherine lay motionless and silent, he came back with an expression on his face I'll never forget. It was fear mixed with confusion, mixed with something else, something darker. "Alexander," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "your wife wanted me to tell you something." And then he whispered words that made me question everything I thought I knew about reality, truth, and who I really am. Everything changed in that instant. The ground shifted beneath me again. "She's not actually paralyzed," Daniel said. His voice was barely a whisper, but it hit like a bomb going off in my chest. The tests show no permanent nerve damage, no paralysis. The neurologists ran every test imaginable: MRI, CT scans, nerve conduction studies. She's been faking it. I felt my knees weaken. The hospital corridor seemed to spin around me. "What are you talking about?" I managed to say. "The medical team suspects she woke up earlier than expected during recovery, heard Torres mentioning the complications before you arrived. She made a choice, Alexander. She decided to pretend to be paralyzed. She wanted to see what you'd do, who you really are, whether you'd stay or run, whether you'd confess or keep lying." I couldn't breathe. The air in the hospital suddenly felt too thin, like I was on top of Mont Royal in the middle of winter. "That's insane. Why would she—" "Keep reading," Daniel interrupted, handing me a letter sealed in an envelope with Catherine's handwriting on the front. My hands shook as I opened it. The paper was expensive, the kind we'd bought for our wedding invitations years ago. The first line said, "If you're reading this, it means you chose Sophia over me. I wanted to know if you'd come back, if you'd stay, if you'd lie to the police for me, if you'd sacrifice your career to protect me." I got my answer. The letter went on to describe everything in meticulous detail. How she'd seen me with Sophia 3 weeks before the surgery outside of Tim Hortons on St. Catherine Street. How she'd followed us, hired a private investigator, collected evidence of every meeting, every text message, every lie. How she'd deliberately chosen December 24th for the surgery because she knew that Christmas fireworks would be too tempting for me to resist. How she'd orchestrated every moment of the paralysis with the help of Torres, who wasn't just some random colleague I'd referred her to. He was her cousin, her first cousin from Seoul who'd immigrated to Canada 5 years ago. They'd planned this together. How she'd even paid off hospital staff to keep silent, to play along, to help her maintain the illusion. The fireworks, the timing, the detective, everything. It was orchestrated like a surgical procedure, a setup, a test to see my true nature. And I'd failed. "This is a lie," I said, my voice cracking like ice on the St. Lawrence in spring. "Catherine would never. She's not capable of—" "Your wife isn't the woman you thought she was," Torres said, stepping into the hallway behind Daniel. His face was cold, clinical, with none of the sympathy I'd seen during the surgery. "Neither of you are who you think you are. That's the point of this whole thing, Alexander. You think you know someone after 9 years, but you don't. Not really. People are far more complex than we give them credit for. Catherine wanted to know who you'd be when she couldn't fight back, when she couldn't argue or leave or defend herself. She wanted to see the real you." I reached for my phone to call Sophia, to ask her if any of this was real, if she knew about Catherine's plan. But there was nothing. No messages, no recent calls. Her contact information was gone from my phone entirely. I searched for her at the hospital, walked through every department, asked at every nurse's station. Nobody had heard of an anesthesiologist named Sophia. I pulled up the staff directory on my phone, scrolled through every name. No Sophia, nothing. The nurses who were there during Catherine's surgery, the ones I'd talked to that night, couldn't remember who assisted with anesthesia. When I described her, long blonde hair, 28 years old, American accent, they looked at me like I was describing a ghost. It was like she never existed at all. Then I found the videos. Security footage from my own house. Footage I didn't know existed because I never installed cameras, but Catherine had. Months before the surgery. The video showed me and Catherine in our bedroom before everything fell apart, back when we still talked to each other. But in these videos, Catherine was talking to someone on the phone, speaking in Korean, a language she rarely used at home. I had to get it translated. A colleague's wife helped me. The translation made my blood run cold. "He's predictable, completely predictable. When he gets scared, he runs towards comfort. Sophia will be perfect for that. She knows exactly how to play him." The videos showed dates going back 6 months, Catherine planning everything, every detail, every move, every manipulation.
I called the police again. This time Detective Morrison came to my house himself, the Victorian row house Catherine and I had bought when we first got married.
"Dr. Chen, we need to talk about the allegations you've made against your wife," he said, sitting in our living room, the room where we used to host dinner parties and drink Korean plum wine with friends. I told him everything. About the fake paralysis, about Torres being Catherine's cousin, about Sophia not existing, about the videos, about the setup. His face remained blank, unreadable. "We have a problem," he said finally. "Your wife filed a complaint against you 3 hours ago. She says you've been stalking her at the hospital, harassing her, making threats against her life. She has evidence, recordings of you saying disturbing things, text messages, voicemails, a journal you supposedly kept detailing fantasies about her death." "That's not possible," I said, standing up so fast I knocked over my coffee mug. It shattered on the hardwood floor. "I just received the letter explaining everything. Daniel gave it to me. Call him, he'll tell you." "What letter?" Morrison interrupted. "Dr. Chen, I spoke with your lawyer Daniel Park 30 minutes ago. He says he never gave you anything. He says you called him yesterday, rambling about conspiracy theories and hallucinations. Your wife says you've been experiencing paranoia since her hospitalization, that you've accused her of faking her condition, that you've been acting increasingly erratic. She's filed for a restraining order. She's also petitioned to have you evaluated psychiatrically." The room started to spin. I pulled out my phone to show him the letter, to show him the photos, to show him proof that I wasn't crazy. But it wasn't there. No photos of the letter, no messages from Sophia, no evidence of anything. Just an empty phone with a cracked screen that I didn't remember cracking and my own fingerprints on it. "When did you last see this letter?" Morrison asked, standing up, his hand moving subtly toward his belt, toward his gun. I just read it 2 hours ago, in the hospital. Daniel handed it to me." He nodded slowly, the way you nod at someone who's unstable. "Dr. Chen, when's the last time you slept, really slept? More than a couple hours?" I couldn't remember. Days blurred together into a gray soup of hospital visits and guilt and fear. The hospital, Catherine's room, messages that appeared and disappeared. Sophia's face, her blonde hair catching the light of the fireworks, her laugh, her touch. Was that real? Was any of it real? The room kept spinning. Morrison was calling someone on his radio, backup, an ambulance. I heard the words psychiatric evaluation and danger to self or others. The paramedics came. They were gentle but firm. They took me to Laurentian Hospital psychiatric ward on the 6th floor. Not as a doctor this time, as a patient, as a case, as a puzzle to be solved, as a man who couldn't figure out what was real anymore. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 15 years of my life in hospitals saving people, putting them back together. Now I was the one who needed saving, the one who was broken. The psychiatrist assigned to my case was Dr. Sarah Kim, a Korean-Canadian woman in her 50s who spoke with the same Seoul accent my mother had. She interviewed me 3 times a day for the first week, asked me about Catherine, about Sophia, about the fireworks, about the letter, about what I thought was real versus what I thought might be delusion. "The human mind is remarkable," she told me during one session. "When faced with unbearable guilt, it creates elaborate scenarios to protect itself, defense mechanisms. Sometimes we invent entire people, entire relationships to justify our actions." But here's what Dr. Kim didn't know. Catherine could walk. On the 3rd day of my admission to the psychiatric ward, I saw her through the small window in my door. She was walking down the hallway with Torres, both of them dressed in regular clothes, talking quietly. No wheelchair, no walker, no paralysis. She saw me watching and stopped, walked to my door, looked at me through the glass with those same dark eyes, and smiled. A smile I'd never seen before. Cold, calculating, victorious.
She visited me officially twice after that. Both times, hospital staff were present. Both times she said the same thing. "I'm sorry you can't handle the truth, Alexander. I'm sorry you broke so easily. I thought you were stronger than this." When I asked her what truth she meant, Whether she'd really been paralyzed or whether it had all been an act, she just smiled again and left. The nurses wrote down that I was experiencing paranoid delusions, that I was accusing my paralyzed wife of conspiracy, that I needed increased medication. Weeks passed, then months. Winter turned to spring, and Montreal came alive again. The snow melted on Mont Royal, revealing the brown grass underneath. The streets filled with people wearing lighter jackets, celebrating the end of another brutal winter. The Canadiens were eliminated from the playoffs in the first round, and the city mourned like it always does. Life continued outside the hospital walls, while I remained locked in that psychiatric ward on a 6th floor, trying to convince anyone who would listen that I wasn't crazy, that Catherine had orchestrated everything, that Sophia had been real, that I wasn't just a man losing his grip on reality. The police investigation went nowhere. They never found any evidence of Sophia. Detective Morrison came to visit me once, about 2 months into my stay. He sat across from me in the small interview room they use for patient meetings, his face tired and worn. "Dr. Chen," he said, "we've exhausted every lead. No birth certificate for anyone named Sophia matching your description. No medical license in Quebec or anywhere in Canada. No social security number. No social media presence. No credit cards. No bank accounts. No employment records at McGill or any other hospital in Montreal. It's like she never existed." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The only explanation that makes sense is that she didn't exist, that you created her in your mind to cope with something else, something you couldn't face." My colleagues from the hospital stopped calling after the first month. Dr. Jennifer Park, who'd been my friend for 8 years, sent one email. "Alex, I hope you get the help you need. We're all rooting for you." Then, silence. The hospital administration put me on indefinite medical leave. Officially, I was experiencing a stress-induced breakdown with psychotic features brought on by professional burnout and marital difficulties. Unofficially, there were questions about whether I'd ever be allowed to practice surgery again, whether my medical license would be suspended permanently, whether the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Quebec would deem me fit to make life-and-death decisions about other human beings. But here's the thing that kept me awake at night in that psychiatric ward, staring at the ceiling tiles and counting them over and over until the numbers lost meaning. The thing that made me question not just my sanity, but my entire understanding of reality. I had proof that Sophia existed. One single piece of evidence they couldn't erase or explain away. A photo from my phone that had automatically backed up to my iCloud account before everything got deleted. I discovered it during a supervised computer session with Dr. Kim, when she allowed me to access my email to contact my lawyer.
I opened my iCloud photos, scrolling through months of images, and there it was, me and Sophia at the fireworks, her blonde hair illuminated by the red and bold explosions in the sky behind us, her hand resting on my chest, my arm around her waist, pulling her close, both of us smiling, happy, alive. The timestamp clearly visible in the corner, December 24th, 7:47 p.m. The exact time Catherine was in surgery. The exact moment her chest was open and Torres was holding her heart in his hands. I showed it to Dr. Kim immediately, my hands shaking with excitement and vindication. "Look," I said, "this is proof. She was real. I didn't make her up." Dr. Kim studied the photo carefully, zooming in on our faces, examining every detail. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. "Alexander, do you know how advanced AI technology is now? Deep fakes can create completely realistic images of people who don't exist, or they can insert you into photos with strangers. This could be a photo you found online and somehow convinced yourself you were in. The mind does remarkable things to protect itself from unbearable truths." The police forensics team examined the photo. They ran it through every detection software they had. Some said it was authentic. Others said it showed signs of digital manipulation. Inconclusive. The hospital's digital forensics expert said the metadata could have been altered, that the timestamp could have been changed, that nothing about the image could be trusted as definitive proof. Catherine, during one of her supervised visits, looked at the photo on Dr. Kim's tablet and said quietly, almost sadly, "That's not even you, Alexander. Look at the man in that photo. Really look." That's someone else. You've superimposed yourself into a stranger's photo because you need to believe you were somewhere else that night, because you can't face the truth of where you really were. I looked at the photo again, really looked, and for a terrifying moment, I wasn't sure. Was that my face, my jacket, my smile? Or had my mind created those details, filling in blanks that didn't exist? The more I stared at it, the less certain I became. Like when you repeat a word over and over until it loses all meaning and becomes just sounds. The photo started to look foreign to me, unfamiliar, like something I'd seen but never lived. But I knew it was real. I had to know it was real. Because if it wasn't, if Sophia never existed, then where was I that night? What was I doing while my wife was dying on an operating table? The hospital's parking lot security footage showed my car arriving at 9:15 p.m., more than an hour after Catherine's surgery ended. Where had I been during that missing hour? What had I been doing, and why couldn't I remember? Dr. Kim suggested that I'd been sitting in my car in the parking lot, dissociating, creating an elaborate fantasy to escape the guilt of not being there. Dissociative fugue states, she explained, can last for hours. You could have been in your car essentially absent from your own consciousness, while your mind created this entire narrative about Sophia and the fireworks. When you came back to yourself, the false memory felt real because to your brain it was real. Maybe she was right. Maybe I did invent Sophia to justify my absence. Maybe my mind created her out of nothing, a beautiful woman with blonde hair and a laugh that made me feel alive, to give myself permission to not be at the hospital, to not face Catherine, to not confront the slow death of our marriage. But there were details I couldn't explain, details that felt too specific to be inventions. Like the smell of Sophia's perfume, something floral and sweet with notes of jasmine and vanilla. I could smell it even now, months later, when I closed my eyes. Could you imagine a smell so vividly that it became real? Like the feeling of her lips, cold from the December wind pressing against mine, the texture of her leather jacket, soft and slightly worn, creaking when she moved, the sound of her voice, slightly raspy with an accent I couldn't quite place, American, but from where? The way she said my name, Alex, not Alexander, like everyone else. These details felt too real, too specific, too textured to be fabrications. But Dr. Kim said the mind could create anything. People who have never been to Paris can have detailed memories of walking along the Seine. People who have never had children can remember the feeling of holding their baby for the first time. The brain is capable of constructing completely false memories that feel absolutely real, especially under stress, especially when confronted with unbearable guilt. I spent hours in that psychiatric ward trying to remember other details about Sophia. Where did we meet? How did our affair start? When did I first kiss her? But every time I tried to remember, the memories felt slippery, like trying to hold water in my hands. I could remember her face, her hair, her laugh, but I couldn't remember her apartment, or what kind of car she drove, or what her favorite food was, or whether she had siblings, or where she grew up. All the details that make a person real seemed to be missing, like she was a character in a movie rather than a living human being. And that's when the real terror started. Not the terror of being trapped in a psychiatric ward or losing my medical license or having my wife orchestrate an elaborate conspiracy against me. The terror of not knowing what was real inside my own mind, of not being able to trust my own memories, my own perceptions, my own understanding of what happened. That's a special kind of hell that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy.
3 months into my stay, something happened that changed everything again. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March, and I was in the common room watching other patients play cards when a nurse I'd never seen before approached me. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. "Dr. Chen," she whispered, looking around to make sure no one else was listening. "I need to tell you something, but you can't tell anyone I told you." My heart started racing. "What is it?" She leaned in closer, her voice barely audible. "Your wife isn't who you think she is. She comes here every week not to visit you, but to meet with Dr. Kim. They talk in her office for hours. I've seen documents, files, things about you, things about someone named Sophia. I think they're planning something." Before I could ask what she meant, another nurse called her name and she disappeared down the hallway. I never saw her again. When I asked about her the next day, the head nurse looked at me confused. "We don't have anyone matching that description on staff," she said. "Are you sure you didn't imagine it?" And just like that, I was doubting myself again. Had she been real? Had that conversation happened? Or was my mind creating more characters, more conspiracies, more elaborate explanations for things I couldn't understand? I asked Dr. Kim directly during our next session, "Are you meeting with Catherine? Are you sharing information about me with her?" She looked genuinely surprised. "Alexander, I'm your doctor. Everything we discuss is confidential. I haven't met with Catherine except for the standard family consultations that are part of your treatment plan. Why would you think otherwise?" I told her about the nurse. She made a note in her file. "This is concerning," she said. "You're creating more characters now, more elaborate scenarios. We might need to adjust your mitation again." But I knew what I'd seen. Or at least, I thought I knew. The line between knowing and thinking I knew had become impossibly blurred. Sometimes I'd lie awake at night and test myself. "What do you know for certain, Alexander? Your name? Yes. Your age? 42. Your profession? Surgeon. Or former surgeon. Your wife's name? Catherine." But then the certainties would start falling apart. Was she really your wife, or was that a delusion too? Did you really go to medical school, or did you invent that entire history? Are you even in a psychiatric ward right now, or is this another layer of the nightmare, another false reality your mind constructed to protect you from something even worse? 4 months into my stay, I was finally allowed supervised visits outside the hospital. Dr. Kim and a psychiatric nurse would take me to Parc La Fontaine for 30-minute walks. It was during one of these walks, in late April when the trees were starting to bud and the park was full of people enjoying the spring weather, that I saw her, Sophia, standing by the pond, feeding ducks, wearing the same leather jacket from the fireworks night. My heart stopped. "There!" I shouted, pointing. "That's her! That's Sophia!" I started running toward her, but the psychiatric nurse grabbed my arm, holding me back. By the time I looked again, she was gone, disappeared into the crowd. Or she had never been there at all. "Did you see her?" I asked Dr. Kim desperately. "The woman by the pond, long blonde hair, leather jacket." Dr. Kim looked at me with sad, patient eyes. "Alexander, there was no one there matching that description. You were looking at an empty space." The psychiatric nurse confirmed it. They both saw nothing, just an empty spot by the pond where I swore Sophia had been standing. That's when I finally broke. Not in a dramatic way, not with screaming or violence or a complete psychotic episode, just a quiet internal collapse. A giving up. A surrender to the possibility that maybe everyone was right. Maybe I was insane. Maybe Sophia never existed. Maybe Catherine wasn't conspiring against me. Maybe I was just a man who couldn't handle the guilt of abandoning his wife during surgery, so my mind created an elaborate fantasy world to explain my absence. Maybe the real horror wasn't the conspiracy. It was the much simpler, much more pathetic truth. I was just a coward who ran away and then couldn't live with what I'd done. I stopped fighting after that. Stopped insisting Sophia was real. Stopped accusing Catherine of orchestrating everything. Started taking the medication without resistance. Started participating in group therapy. Started saying what Dr. Kim wanted to hear. I understand now that I created a false narrative to cope with unbearable guilt. I see how my mind constructed an elaborate delusion to avoid facing the truth about my marriage and my choices. I'm ready to do the work to get better. And you know what? It worked. Within 6 weeks, Dr. Kim recommended me for outpatient treatment, said I'd made remarkable progress, that I was finally facing reality, that I was ready to re-enter society with continued therapy and medication management. The hospital discharged me on a sunny morning in late May. Catherine had already filed for divorce. She got the house in Westmont. She got everything we'd built together, our savings, our friends, our shared history. She even got the truth. Whatever that truth was, whatever really happened that night. I moved into a small apartment in the Plateau near Parc Jean Monts. Studio apartment, barely 400 square feet, with a tiny kitchen and a bathroom that never got warm enough. It was all I could afford with what was left of my savings after the hospital bills and lawyer fees. I spent my days walking around the neighborhood, going to therapy 3 times a week, taking my medication, trying to rebuild some kind of life. But I felt hollow, like something essential had been scooped out of me, leaving just a shell that looked like Alexander Chen, but wasn't really him anymore.
The competency hearing was scheduled for early July. The medical board wanted to review my case, interview my psychiatrist, assess whether I was fit to return to surgery. I prepared for weeks, practicing answers to questions they might ask. How do I know what's real now? How can patients trust me when I can't trust myself? What happens if I'm in the middle of surgery and start hallucinating? I had answers prepared. Careful, measured responses about ongoing treatment and medication and therapy and insight into my condition. But I didn't believe any of them. I was just saying what they needed to hear. The truth was, I still didn't know what was real. I still couldn't trust my own mind. And every single day, I second-guessed everything. The hearing was scheduled for July 15th, but on July 12th, 3 days before, something happened that destroyed what little stability I'd managed to build. I got a phone call from an unknown number. When I answered, there was just breathing on the other end. Heavy breathing. Then a woman's voice, barely a whisper. "Alex, I'm sorry. This wasn't supposed to happen. They're watching me. They're watching you. Don't trust Catherine. Don't trust Torres. Don't trust anyone." Then the line went dead. I called back immediately. The number was disconnected. I called Detective Morrison. He said the call came from a burner phone that had been destroyed immediately after. Untraceable. "It's probably a prank," he said. "Someone who heard about your case and decided to mess with you. Happens more often than you'd think." But I knew that voice. Or I thought I knew it. It sounded like Sophia. Or what I remembered Sophia sounding like. Or what I'd imagined she sounded like. The uncertainty was maddening. I didn't tell Dr. Kim about the call. I knew what she'd say. That I was having another episode. That I needed to increase my medication. That I was creating more elaborate scenarios to avoid facing reality. So I kept it to myself. Let it eat away at me in private. Let it contaminate every thought, every moment, every interaction. I started looking over my shoulder again. Started seeing faces in crowds that might or might not be Sophia. Started receiving strange messages on my phone. Texts that appeared and then disappeared before I could screenshot them. Or maybe they never appeared at all. Maybe I was just imagining the vibration, the notification, the words on the screen. The competency hearing came and went. They decided I wasn't ready to return to surgery. Not yet. Maybe in another 6 months with continued treatment and demonstrated stability. It felt like a death sentence. Like they'd officially declared that the old Alexander Chen, the surgeon who could hold a human heart in his hands and not tremble, was gone forever. Replaced by this broken version who couldn't even trust his own perceptions. If you're watching this right now, if you've made it this far through my story, you're probably wondering what the truth is. You want me to tell you definitively. Did I cheat? Was Sophia real? Was Catherine faking her paralysis? Was it all a conspiracy, or was I just crazy? And I wish I could give you that answer. I genuinely wish I could tie everything up neatly with a bow and say, here is exactly what happened. But I can't, because I don't know. Even now, sitting here months later, I don't know what was real and what wasn't. But I've learned something important, something that changed my entire understanding of reality, truth, and the human mind. The scariest thing in the world isn't monsters or conspiracies or elaborate plots to destroy you. The scariest thing is losing your ability to know what's real, to trust your own mind, to separate memory from fantasy, fact from fiction, truth from delusion. Once that foundation cracks, everything else collapses. Your entire sense of self, your understanding of your own history, your confidence in your perceptions, all of it becomes negotiable, uncertain, fluid. And maybe that's what this whole thing was designed to teach me. Maybe Catherine did orchestrate everything, not to punish me, but to show me what it feels like to lose your grip on reality. To show me what she experienced during those years of our failing marriage, when I was emotionally absent even when I was physically present, when I looked at her but didn't really see her, when I heard her words but didn't really listen. Maybe she wanted me to experience that same disconnection, that same uncertainty, that same feeling of not knowing what was real in your own life. Or maybe there was no grand plan. Maybe I really did have a breakdown. Maybe I created Sophia out of nothing, a beautiful fiction to justify why I wasn't there when Catherine needed me most. Maybe my mind fractured under the weight of guilt and stress and the slow death of my marriage, and this entire elaborate conspiracy theory is just how I coped with that fracture. The truth is, I'll never know for certain. And I've made peace with that. Or I'm trying to. Some days are easier than others. Some days I wake up and feel almost normal, almost like the old Alexander. Other days I wake up and question whether I'm really awake at all, or if this is just another layer of the dream, another false reality my mind constructed. But I get through it, one day at a time, one moment at a time, trying to rebuild something resembling a life from the wreckage of everything I used to be. So, if you're going through something similar, if you're questioning your own reality, your own perceptions, your own understanding of what's true, know that you're not alone. This space between certainty and doubt, between reality and delusion, is more common than we like to admit.